What is up, Brad fans? Thank you for tuning in. I got a couple quick announcements before we start the show. Of course, as always, please do follow us wherever you get in your podcasts. Leave us a comment, rate it, subscribe, all that. To those that have done it, I appreciate. To those who haven't, consider it. Also, you can follow us on Twitter, Instagram, @2BradForYou, and you can hit me up on Twitter and Instagram @bvanparadon. And my lovely co-host, British Brad, @BradleyW.Hayes. And that's going to be important because we're going to try something new for our 50th episode, which is coming up quickly. We're thinking of doing a Take Your Questions show. So in order for that to work, we're going to need your questions. So you can submit questions, anything science related, anything about us, well, really anything at all. Let's not put any limits on it, but I'm assuming you guys come here for some science, so I assume that's what we'll get. So you can DM us on any of those social media channels, so @bvanparadon, @2BradForYou, @BradleyW.Hayes, Twitter and Instagram. You can also go to our website, 2bradforyou.wordpress.com. There's a contact form on there, so if you submit a question there, it will come to me. I will get it. If we develop or create any new channels to get questions to us, I will update that in the coming episodes, but we'll see how this goes. Maybe it doesn't work. Maybe no one's listening. Maybe we get no questions and we have to scrap the whole idea, but we're throwing it out there. We're going to see what we can do with it. If it doesn't work, we'll do something else for the 50th, but I hope it does. So drop us a line. Give us whatever's on your mind. Give us a question that we can try and do for you. Give back to the audience for our 50th episode. So other than that, and the usual badgering y'all to follow us on the social medias and wherever you get in your podcasts, that's all I have. Today's episode, I was joined by 1/3 of the Housecoat Boys from Vancouver, Jared Cuthbertson. We had a blast. We talked about the scientific reasons as to why coronavirus isn't engineered. So there's actual scientific evidence behind this. Unfortunately, the two major powers, the two big countries in the world right now, China and the US, both have reasons for wanting to keep everything ambiguous and shuffle blame around or just shut down any notion of where things came from and who did what. So that really sucks, but there is some genetic evidence as to why this wasn't engineered. And so I try and break down that as best I can. I think I got a little lost because it's stretching my knowledge of virology biology. Holy moly. So we get into that, and then we talked about Blood Boys. We've been teasing it for a while. It's something that Jared and I wanted to do. Unfortunately, Robbie couldn't be here for this episode, but this whole idea of taking blood, young blood, and putting it into your body for anti-aging purposes. So we kind of go into a little bit of the history of that, where that science is. Spoiler, it's not great right now, but it was a fun conversation. So having said that, I just wanted to get one thing off my chest, which kind of goes to this whole idea of this misinformation and the cover-ups and stuff that's going on about the coronavirus. There's a lot of new information that's going to be coming out. So just because your health officials got something wrong, it doesn't mean they were purposefully covering things up. There's a big difference between Chinese propaganda and parroting Chinese propaganda and being misled. There's also a big difference between getting things wrong and having to adjust your opinions for new data and willfully ignoring experts. So I see a lot of people getting upset with experts and getting upset with the WHO. And you know what? The WHO is not a perfect organization. However, it's only as good as we make it. So if you're upset that it seems like they're too in the pocket of China, well, then we should encourage our governments to be more involved in the WHO, and that's funding, that's putting personnel there, appointing people to those positions, volunteering our expertise, because really none of us can solve these global disease problems on our own. So we need a body like the WHO, and that body needs to have buy-in by everybody, and it needs to have expertise from everyone, and it needs to be allowed to really do what it's designed to do. So that just kind of really bothered me. It's going on with all this coronavirus disinformation stuff. So it's just remember that when you're getting upset with whoever you're getting upset with, or you're curious, confused. There's a big difference between, being misled by China and parroting their propaganda. There's a big difference between getting things wrong and adjusting your position, because this is a novel disease, and the information will change. So let's just, trust our experts. They are experts. They are there for a reason. And, let's stay safe, support each other. And when we do the autopsy on this whole situation, we'll be able to decide who did what. That's not to say that we can't blame some people for obviously covering things up, China, and other people for obviously ignoring experts and also trying to cover it up, the White House. But hopefully this episode will clear up some of the engineered virus, some of the did it come from a lab stuff. Okay, I've wasted enough of your time. Let me bring you to the episode where we are joined by my good friend, Jared Cuthbertson. All right. Let me welcome back to the show, Jared, a.k.a. what's that? Saggy McCool?
Guten Tag.
Welcome. Well, we each got a cup of what? What are you doing? Would you going with the Clorox, or are you going with the Mr. Clean?
Yeah. It's a mix. It's a mix of both, with a little bit of cab, with a little bit of breakfast wine in there.
Yeah. Well, cheers, man. Thanks for being here. We'll report back the whether the disinfectant that we drank worked.
Mm-hmm.
As far as I know, I'm still Rona free. So
yeah, and I'm gonna hit a tanning bed as well. I hear that's quite useful.
Yeah, but you gotta get the light inside you.
I put a light bulb up my ass, actually. I hear you loud and clear, Mr. President.
Yeah.
One got a light bulb. One got a work light, a treble light, and put it up my butt.
I just want to see the video, the Instagram video, of like two, rednecks, jean shorts with "Hail to the Chief" playing, da, 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 da,
Yeah.
and a flag blowing in the background, and one being like, "All right, here we go, Jimbo, in it goes."
Yeah,
as he salutes, and it just
a large UV light.
Yeah, as he salutes to the picture of Trump. Yeah, fire it up.
Yeah.
Yeah, beautiful stuff. Well, I mean, I don't think we need to go into that theory. We don't need to debunk that, right?
No, I don't think so.
We'll see if, as we're recording, we get confirmation that Kim Jong-un is dead.
Yeah.
That could be our breaking news story for this
Do we even know what he
episode.
was? Do they know? Is there any news like what he was sick with, or was he just poisoned by, like, I assume his nephew or possibly someone in his family?
Well, let's
Right?
not forget
I mean,
that.
people just,
Yeah,
you know,
let's not forget that the man was like 5'4", 300 pounds, avid smoker, drinker.
yeah, he was not the
So
picture of health. Yeah.
it didn't look like he was going to be doing so
And
well
I
anyway.
assumed that I assume he was putting a lot of drugs into his body too.
Oh yeah,
Like, I just don't think you're like, you're not a big party dictator and you stop at the smoking and drinking.
yeah. You got to imagine there's some other things going on, but yeah, who knows? We'll see. We'll see. But we are going to discuss right off the bat the persistent rumors that
Mm.
coronavirus is an engineered weapon. And I mean, we won't touch on the 5G. Well, maybe we can touch on the 5G, because I mean, there's just less evidence for that. Like, we just don't know, right? We
Yeah,
just
well,
don't know.
the numbers aren't in, is the thing. We don't know what
Yeah.
5G is. No one knows what it is, really.
I just keep seeing the placards of people saying it's
Yeah.
death, and don't
Well,
subject
it
your
is.
children to this.
Well, I'm pretty sure the virus was created in a lab and 5G came out of a wet market when they were keeping, a cell tower too close to a router. They're not supposed to be in that sort of proximity, and that, I think, created 5G, if I'm not
Right.
mistaken.
Right. So we'll have to check in with the eggheads in the lab if they can look
Yeah.
at the genome of the 5G and
Yeah,
see if it's
trace it
It
back.
you trace it back to, a hybrid of
Yeah.
3G and 2G.
Yeah, that's right.
But I did wanna, like, this is something that, like, I've seen in, well, obviously, the president of the unnamed country
Mhm.
was talking about how they're opening up an investigation into whether this was a lab created virus that was
Yeah.
leaked and stuff. And so the thing is that since, like, March 17th, there was a paper that was put out in, one of the most prestigious scientific journals you can get into, Nature, um, basically going through the, like, hard scientific evidence that says why this isn't likely, an engineered virus.
Yeah.
So there's actually, like, you can look at the genome of the thing and do a
Mhm.
bunch of these, experiments and compare it to other strains of the virus and stuff, and more or less come to the conclusion that it's very unlikely that this is a engineered virus.
Yeah.
So it still
Well,
leaves open the question of, like, whether it was in a lab and got out,
right.
but we'll get to all that because
But
'cause I'm
also,
gonna
like,
break it down.
yeah, didn't, like, the start of, like, the rumors or the idea, like, it came from that paper out of India, right?
Yeah, that was
That that
one
that
of the
that said it was
things.
linked to HIV. I think that kinda, like, started the ball.
Yeah, that was one of the things, and we
And
talked
then a
about this.
senator also in the
Yeah.
state, a Republican senator was like, "Well, we'll see. We don't have all the information." That fucking riled up the hogs,
Yeah.
and, they hit the chat forums.
Yeah. Well, then the other thing I think is that it's just like, China is definitely covering stuff up. Like,
Yes. Well, they're
that's
China. China's gonna do what China gonna do.
yeah, that's
Cover some shit up, possibly kill some journalists. I'm not saying.
yeah, it's when you run a communist regime, this is just, par for the
Yeah,
course, right?
yeah. You
So,
gotta
I
break
mean,
some
that
eggs, make
doesn't
an omelet.
yeah. So that doesn't look good. But the thing that
Yeah,
the shitty thing about this is that it gets me is that it's like both the US and China, the 2 big players, right, in the world,
yeah,
and they're at odds, obviously. They both have an incentive to leave this murky, zone as to where it came from. China doesn't want to be like, "Oh yeah, look at our wet market
yeah,
practices and the fact that we, you know, silenced all the people that were trying to warn everybody about this." So that's their mess. And then you have the US on the other side that
yeah,
is like, just fucking drop the ball. Like, just, for the richest
yeah.
country in the
Oh,
world with some
dude,
of the best doctors and scientists, they just fucking drop the
just
ball.
beefed it.
Yeah, so Trump's, his motivation is now like, "Oh, well, it wasn't that, don't look there. It's China's fault,
Yeah,
it must be from a so
yeah.
it's
Like,
just it's obvious that
once
they've
again,
not
Trump going to like, yeah.
Trump
He's a
gonna do what
master
Trump
of
would do,
being like, "This is not my fault," you know? So,
when it very clearly is. Yeah, he's
yeah,
really good at
yeah.
that. No shame,
China.
0 shame. But anyway, so I figured, like, here's what we do, because I'm in WhatsApp groups and stuff with friends. I've seen this going around where people are just legitimately like, how do we know that it's not, like, what is the,
Yeah,
because when you read the newspaper articles and stuff, it's just like there's like one or two lines that just say scientists say it's not. And then in this whole
yeah.
climate that we're in right now, people are just like, yeah, but what is that? What does that mean? And do I trust
Can't
the
trust
Chinese
science.
scientists? Yeah, do I trust
Yeah,
the Chinese scientists, or what are we doing here? So this is like I said, from March 17th. This is like a well-known research group in virology in the US, the Scripps Institute in California. So it's a prestigious institution. And this was their evidence of why it's not engineered. So we know that SARS-2, it's like the seventh known coronavirus to infect humans. There's seven of them
okay.
that can get into humans. So it's like, it's a new strain, but we have these other strains that we can compare it to. And you can compare it to other coronaviruses in bats and pangolins and basically anything. You can find
Yeah,
these coronaviruses and all these different things. And then you can also look at influenza, different family of diseases, but they're both respiratory infections. So that you have these comparisons that you can make, and you look at uh, the the specific areas of the genome of the virus
Sure.
that code for the different proteins that allow it to get into a cell. So maybe you've heard about the spike protein.
No, I have not.
Okay, so all viruses have this thing called a spike protein, and it's named thus because it's like a spike that sticks out, and it like recognizes the human cell or the bat cell or whatever cell that it's trying to get into, and if it matches that, it can lock
Yeah.
on, and then that's how it can then get
Right.
into the into the cell. So if you look at the SARS virus and its spike protein and compare it with the other ones, this is where you can start to see like, oh, well, it looks like this one or it looks like that one. And so it likely came from this or that. And the SARS-2 has some unique things that make it, good at getting into humans.
Yeah.
And so the first one is it's got this on its spike protein, it looks like it's got this area on it that can bind to a protein on the human cell called ACE2. So ACE2 is just the name of this protein on a human cell that the virus can recognize and lock onto.
Mhm.
So they found that this when you
Ah.
and so I'm trying to find a way to get through like without
Yeah.
the super crazy science stuff.
Without getting, like, into the weeds?
Yeah. So it's got on the spiked protein, it's got a domain. It's got like an area that can bind to ACE2, and then it's also got this other site that's been mutated. So there's two sites that have been mutated that look different than the other SARS viruses.
Okay.
And so the first one that you can look at is it's called the receptor binding domain. So basically, it's just the area that binds to this ACE2 protein,
Yeah.
and if the glove fits, it's gonna go in, it's
That's
gonna
quit.
yeah, exactly. And so, this one, when they compare it to the other, SARS viruses, or when you look at this, sorry, and then you look at, like, the different cells, it looks like, okay, we got this SARS-2, it's got this binding domain that looks like it can bind well to humans,
Yeah.
ferrets, cats, and then a few other species. And so you have all these. What they do is they look at all the amino acids. So it's
Mhm.
just the molecules that make up a protein, and you can tell which ones are going to be there by looking at the DNA, and then you can these amino acids, they all have different hydrogens and
Yeah.
carbons and stuff on them, and that's going to dictate how they fold and how they connect to each other,
'Kay.
so the binding and stuff like this. And so when you look at just the raw sequence, the raw DNA sequence, you can say, okay, that we have this amino acid, this amino acid, this amino acid, and you can get the whole string of them. But what you don't know is how they're going to fold and interact with each other. So you can get an idea of like, okay, this looks like it will bind well to this or that, or but you're never really completely sure how it's going to work because there's just so many variables that would go into the structure and the
Yeah.
folding, and it's 3D, it's three-dimensional and shit like that. So we know that it can bind. We know the virus can bind to the human cell because it's infecting a fuck ton of people. Um, but when you use the computer models that would predict, the protein folding and how all
Yeah.
these interactions and stuff would work, the computers say that it shouldn't work. So the computers
Oh,
give you an answer that are like, well, this based on this SARS-2 sequence, you wouldn't expect that it would get into a human cell so well. And so
right.
this is one of the first points of evidence that it's like, well, if you wanted to engineer a virus, you wouldn't make this type of, binding domain because it wouldn't be obvious to you. Does that make sense?
Right. Yeah, 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 that makes sense.
Yeah.
So so then why are people like, is there any sort of science, like, is there, like, any kind of like, that paper that came out of India that related it to, like, the HIV strain and said it was, like, engineered off of HIV,
Hmm.
um, like, is that just bad science, or is that
Yeah.
yeah,
Bad
like, that's
science.
all that like, yeah, that's they just don't
It's
know what
bad
they're doing.
science. It's bad science, and for example, it's like, like I said, like, you can look at the gene sequence. So you can look at the ATGCs,
Yeah.
like, that are in the line on the
Mhm.
DNA, or in this case, the RNA, and from that, you can then you can translate that into amino acids, which are larger molecules that
Yeah.
then fold and bind and make these proteins. So you can look at that. You can just compare sequence and say, "Oh, HIV and SARS both have AATTGG, and you'd be like, oh, well, look at they're the same.
Yeah.
But that's not taking into account the whole picture. There's like you got to look at all the other letters, and you got to look at when do you start, like when is the beginning of the sentence, like you could
Mhm.
just match up letters and it wouldn't make sense, right?
Yeah.
You have to actually look at like what that means, and biologically then how does that translate, what kind of amino acid is going to be. So really it was just bad science. They just took a snapshot of the genomes and said, hey, look at this part looks like this part. But if you did that, you could find any section
You
of,
you could infer it'd be anything, right?
yeah, well, and you could look
Or
at,
like varying amounts of, like, different,
yeah,
viral diseases.
yeah, exactly. And I mean, there's only so many letters, right? So it's like
Yeah.
you could you could it's going to look similar across anything that you look at.
Mhm.
So yeah, I mean, the long and short of it was this is bad science, and it got retracted basically right away. And so when you look at this, now they're like actually doing these where not only where are we looking at the sequence, but then we're looking at how it's folding and how the
Yeah.
interactions with the cell and stuff might go. And that's the big thing, is that it's like we know that it works, but all of our, if you looked at all the computational models or computational analysis of this protein and stuff, it wouldn't be clear that it should work. And it's
Right.
basically just because I mean, excuse me, you run
Oof.
into this, you run into this all the time in biology, and especially with proteins, is that you will be, scientists will be trying to solve the 3D structure of a protein. So they'll,
Mhm.
like I said, they'll have the sequence and stuff, but they'll be like, how does it actually look in three-dimensional space? Because this is how all biological interactions are. They're these like
Yeah.
3D lock and key type mechanisms that are fitting together. Um, and we run into it all the time where we can't figure it out, but evolution, by the power of natural selection and
Does
running
it.
like a million
Yeah.
experiments, yeah, it does it in ways that you would never even think of.
Right.
So this is exactly that. So that's kind of the first bit that shows you that it's like probably not human engineered, because there's really like
Yeah.
no avenue to sort of think that humans would have come up with this. Um, so it's likely the result of natural selection. Like I said, the computer models wouldn't predict that this is how you would make a sweet SARS virus. So it's, once again, evolution just trumps us and is way better at this. So the next thing is,
Yeah.
you have this other area on the spike protein, and it looks like it's gotten 12 different base pairs added into it. And what that does is it looks like this has created a site on the spike protein that can be cut. It's
Okay.
basically a cut point. Um, and the reason it needs to be cut is because if you think of the virus as like a circle or a sphere, and your cell is a sphere, when they come together, so you have the binding thing that locks it on, but then the two spheres have to like mold into one, like two bubbles coming together so that they
Yeah.
become one bubble, and then that's how all the virus stuff can get in. So it's got to actually, like, they have to actually merge. And so in order
Mm.
to do that, this spike protein needs to be cut so that the sphere can kind of open up, if you think about it that way. So you first got to
What?
cut it, yeah, and then it can like open up and
Yeah.
like fuse with the other. I wish this was a
Yeah.
video podcast
Yeah,
right
I
now.
know, you're making a lot of hand gestures right now of what that might look like, 2 blobs coming together.
Yeah, it's super hot in the virology
Yeah.
world. It's super hot. I
Yeah.
mean, I'm pretty sure this is what the Spice Girls were talking about when they wrote "When Two Become One."
2 become 1 and 2.
Yeah, a lot of people don't know that, but the Spice Girls were like avid virus fans.
Yeah. Yeah.
So when two become one. Um, so yeah, basically you need this cut site, and the cut site is determined by the sequence. So the DNA sequence, because then
Yeah.
there'll be some enzyme floating around there that it matches, that it can lock onto that. And once it locks onto that target, then it just does its cutting job. That's just how the biology works. So you have this cleavage site, it's called.
Nice.
Yeah. So depending on, let me look at my notes here. Yeah, so that's the second mutation that they noticed is different from the other SARS viruses and stuff. And the thing is that they don't actually know how important this site is yet for SARS-2 in terms of like
Mhm.
being infective and stuff like this, but we know from other viruses that these sites are important in determining which cells you can infect. So if you have a
Okay.
different type of or a different cleavage site that gets a specific enzyme that it cuts there, then you can get into bat cells. If you use a different enzyme to cut at a different point, you can get into, duck cells or
Yeah.
whatever it is. And so this site on the SARS-2 virus, it uses this enzyme called furin. And a furin is an enzyme that's found in humans. Uh, and it's this is what it does. It cuts different proteins at different things to make them
Yeah.
active or inactive. So there's that. And then so when we look at SARS and compare it to bats, the bat sequence doesn't have this site. So
Mm.
this is a new cleavage site for SARS when you compare it to bats.
Yeah.
Um, but we do know that if you add this site, this type of cleavage site to SARS-1,
Mhm.
it allows SARS-1 to fuse with cells better, but it doesn't
Oh.
necessarily increase the amount of virus that goes into those cells. So it plays some role, but that's again just evidence that this is likely a mutation that is
That
increased
occurred
SARS-2.
naturally.
Yeah, it occurred naturally. It's just
But
basically proving that it can.
would there be a way to tell that, like, whether, like, let's say, like, this that if that was done in a lab?
Right. So that's the next. Yeah, that comes a little later. So if you look at the next comparison we want to look at is bird flu, because this is another
Yeah.
example of these cleavage sites evolving naturally. So they look at if you look at avian influenza, bird flu, and in areas where you have like a really dense chicken population,
Mhm.
so like a slaughterhouse kind of thing or
Yeah.
a chicken farm or whatever, they've seen these bird flus. If there's a lot, like they can rapidly replicate in these chickens and they pass around a lot across all these chickens. That's a perfect environment for natural selection to take over. And they've actually seen that these cleavage sites evolve in bird flus. And when
Yeah.
they do, they go from being not that deadly to way more deadly. So it does happen in nature. And so again, all this kind of points to that there was some kind of natural pathway for this.
Hmm.
It's basically just
For
setting
the
the
virus to
stage
take
that
over.
like
Yeah.
this happens in nature. So
Yeah.
why wouldn't this one also be nature? Um so then the question is like, oh, the other thing is we already have a bunch of strains of coronavirus that they use in the lab to study coronaviruses.
Yeah.
So you have to like, if you want to, and this is how they figured out that if you add this cleavage site to SARS-1, it fuses
Mhm.
better to cells and stuff like that. And basically, if you want to like work with viruses and fuck with their genes and then see how good they do, you have to like, I don't know to get too technical, but you have to have a good working model virus that you can
Yeah.
then mess with this gene, mess with that gene,
Mhm.
and they don't all work. Like you can't just take anyone and bring it into the lab. Sometimes it doesn't survive in the cells that you're working with in the lab. It's just not that good. Like it has to be in the
Yeah.
body and it doesn't work in the lab. So we have 4 strains that we already know work to do this coronavirus research in the lab. And when you look at those and compare
Mhm.
it to SARS-2, it looks nothing like it. So it's like you can tell that it's not one of the previously known you know, starting viruses that you would like start with in
Right.
the lab. So, so how did it happen? It's likely that it came from bats because there's a closely related one that, so it's got like 96% similarity. So if you just look at the letters in the genome, 96% of them are the same. And I mean, you can do this with humans and chimpanzees, right? It's like
Mhm.
98% of our
Oh,
genome
okay.
is the same as
Yeah.
chimpanzees, but you get a widely different thing, right?
Yeah.
Um, so there is,
But are you saying that we have a similarity to monkeys?
yes, but only because God intended it to be that way.
Okay, I didn't wanna get derailed too much, but I'm glad you said that. Okay, go back to what you were saying.
uh, and so if you look at the pangolins, this was like one of the people are talking about that the
And that's a dumb
pangolin.
penguin? Is that what that is?
Yes, basically, a scaly
Okay.
penguin with 4 limbs that look like legs, not wings.
What a weird looking penguin.
Yeah, a pangolin.
Pangolin.
So this was like a lot of people were talking about how this was likely one of the intermediate hosts. And so
Okay.
if you look at the pangolin version of the virus, of a coronavirus, it has this same receptor binding domain, or a very
Okay.
similar one to SARS-2. So that was the first mutation that we talked about that allows it to grab onto the cell, the ACE protein on the cell. So if you
Yeah.
look at the pangolin version, it's not that similar to SARS-2 except for this region. So the pangolin version has this one area that looks like it could bind onto human cells. So this again points to that it could be that the thing started in bats, which is the most
Yeah.
closely related virus in terms of just similarity. And then if it got into a pangolin, the pangolin has this similar type of binding thing. So then
Yeah.
you get some kind of selection happening there, which
Those
then
those
allows it
spike
to go.
protein, those spike, it locks,
Yeah, they
it
can.
blobs into each other, and then it can like go into something else,
Yeah, and now it
and then
has
be
the
transmitted
ability
into
to.
humans.
Yeah, now it has the ability to
Yeah.
get into humans and stuff. So again, points to a natural
Yeah.
selection sort of route. But there's no animal coronavirus they've found that has that cleavage site. So that
Hmm.
second mutation we're
Yeah.
talking about. So that means that we haven't found the direct parent virus for SARS-2, but it's possible that it's out there in animals and we just haven't found it
Yeah.
because there's a fuck ton of these viruses out there and we haven't found them all, you know?
Mhm.
Um, and we know that the mutations can occur in this site, like I was talking about with the chickens and stuff. Um, but in order for it to do that, it would likely need a lot of hosts, like the chicken scenario, where it's really
Yeah.
dense. So is it likely then that all of these two mutations that are necessary were
Mhm.
acquired in the animal world before getting to humans? The scientists say no. So maybe it got one of them. Maybe it got this
Yeah.
pangolin version where it can grab on, but to get this cleavage site, it would need a lot of animals really, close together and rapidly, flip through to get this thing.
I
But
couldn't
then,
think of where that would happen though.
well, yeah, the wet market. Yeah, obviously.
Which, by the way, wet markets sound fucking wild. Like,
Yeah.
I didn't even know. I had no idea what a pangolin was, but apparently you're storing them next to bats and chickens and God, like
Yeah.
wet
But,
markets would be fucking wild.
but you would need, yeah, it is wild and it's not a great practice and probably shouldn't
Cool.
be. Yeah. But if you're going to look at that, then you also have to look at factory farming because that's the
Yeah.
thing is that with these like I said, with like it would need a high density of animals, but it would need a
Yeah.
high density of animals that have this similar binding domain, right? So you would need like a fuck ton of pangolins
Yeah.
to be there, and I don't know that the markets have that, but anyway. So then this makes them think that what happened is that it had probably this first mutation, this
Yeah.
binding domain that allows it to grab onto the cells. It had that, and then it jumped into humans and was before we even knew about it was being passed around a little bit from human to human, and then that's where it got the second mutation, the
Oh.
cleavage site that uses the human enzyme furin to get in. So that seems to be the most likely scenario is that there was actually human to human transmission going on before we even knew about it and before it
Yeah.
fully became SARS-2. It was some kind of intermediate thing that looked like, a mix of the strain that mixed from bats to pangolins,
Yeah.
and then it got into some humans, and maybe it's not that efficient at getting into
Yeah.
humans yet, but it's kind of there, and so as
Is
humans pass it around it mutates again
is
and
that
it
why, like,
becomes
what
SARS-2.
yeah, is that, like, why it might have been, like, they weren't really tracing, like, when they were like, "Oh, it's been here for X amount of time," and now they're finding out that it was probably, like, circulating for a much longer time,
Yeah, 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 yeah,
within China and even, like, the States because, yeah, they weren't identifying it
yes.
as, COVID-19 and was as something else.
Well, it could be, yeah, it could be that. So you would have to go because it's like this strain that was in humans first that I was just talking about wouldn't be SARS-2. It would be something like SARS-2,
Yeah.
but missing that last piece, that second piece. And then it actually like got that within humans and then became
Right.
SARS-2 and then took off. So the way that you would find out if this was the case is you would have to go back to like kind of random samples of people from before the outbreak and see if you
Hmm.
could find a virus that's circulating either in animals or in humans that was, you know, exactly like SARS-2 or like very much like SARS-2 except
Similar.
missing that one piece,
Sure.
right? Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense.
Because it's really just these two mutations that they're looking at that like kind of show you that it's
Yeah.
not engineered. Um, yeah, and then there's reports like they're pushing back the date of when the first human cases were found. Like a lot of them weren't found at that market; they were actually likely circulating before. So this is the case is that it's like it most likely came to humans and then
Yeah.
evolved this second thing in humans. And this is the same with when you look at MERS, the Middle
Hmm.
East respiratory syndrome, the other coronavirus that's really deadly. It jumps into humans from camels, but it never really like spreads that much among humans. And it's because it's not perfectly adapted for humans like
Yeah.
SARS-2 is. It's like it gets in and it can infect you and it can kill people, but it doesn't transmit very well. And so
Ah.
every outbreak of MERS comes from a camel source. And then there's a little bit of human to human transmission, but not much. And some of that is because they lock it down.
Yeah.
But so that's the case is that if once you get a bit of human to human transmission happening, the virus might not be perfectly good to work
Hmm.
with humans, but it can transmit a little bit and it can survive a little bit. And then that just gives it the chances to adapt and mutate to be really
Okay.
good in humans. And then that's likely what happened. And now we have this, boom, this outbreak. Um, so there was
But like,
probably, yeah.
I was just gonna say, but like, so what's the danger you think of like, people believing that this is a man-made disease, that this came like,
The
whether it's trying to pigeonhole China
Yeah,
as it being their issue, or you know, I don't know, just general distrust of the government.
all of those things,
Yeah.
but also it means that you're discounting the actual danger, which is
Yeah.
that these viruses are in animals all the time and that we need to be, doing a lot more research into animal diseases and just surveillance. Like there's like
Right.
like it's just surveillance programs where you just have scientists going into the jungle catching random animals and looking at what viruses they have. This happens all over the world, and arguably it doesn't happen enough because you need
Yeah.
funding for it, right?
Hmm.
And it's just a crapshoot. You're just doing random samples of different
Damn.
animals and looking for viruses that look like they might get into like that if they did jump
People.
into humans would be very bad. And
Yeah.
same with pork
Like.
facilities and
Yeah.
chicken facilities and stuff. There's veterinarians that are there all the time monitoring what flu is circulating amongst those animals and looking for
Hmm.
one that like, oh, we got to watch out for this one. Or
Looks like a good job.
and if they see ones that do, then they start just killing all the animals, right?
Yeah.
So that's the real danger is that if you put the source of it on some false whatever, oh, it was just a lab, and then okay, so we make all these rules to like stop
For labs.
for labs
Yeah.
where that's actually where the work on like vaccines and all this like stuff that you need is
Yeah.
done, and you discount the fact that most likely these things are coming from wild animal populations, and as
Yeah.
you have global warming and animals move into different ranges because the temperature of their home range is fucked, so they got to go to other
Yeah.
places, or you have deforestation, so the animals have nowhere to go and then they
Right.
start
They're
coming into
moving
the
out of where they
cities.
should be, and
Yeah,
they're combining with other populations of animals they
yeah,
normally wouldn't be
so it's
introduced to.
yeah, exactly, so that's the real danger. So this is the idea that like it wasn't engineered, like somebody didn't build it in a lab.
Yeah.
So then the second thing is, well, if it wasn't built in the lab, we still don't know that it maybe they had it in a lab and
Right.
and it escaped, or maybe they had something like it in a lab and they were doing experiments with it and it mutated into SARS-2 and then escaped.
Yeah.
So it is possible that SARS-2 got the receptor binding domain, that first mutation that it
Mhm.
needed during uh, what you would do, like if you were like just running it through cells. So if you just had like cells in a lab, and this is how you study viruses, you don't put them like before you put them into an actual animal or something like that to do tests. You just have like living cells in a dish, like a bunch of like
Yeah.
goo in a dish, cells living in a dish, and
Nice.
you just put the virus in there and you just pass it lineage, just go generation after generation after generation. It is possible that the first mutation, the binding domain,
Yeah.
it could have happened there because that's been seen in some studies with SARS. But the fact that you find this this really similar binding domain in the pangolins means that it's more likely that it's natural because
Yeah.
the chances that you do this in a lab and you got it and it looks exactly like something that you found in the wild, it's just like the
Chances
probability
are low.
dictates that
Yeah.
it's probably from the wild.
Yeah.
There's a million animals out there and there's like a couple labs running these things through cells. So
Well, but also, like, I mean, didn't people say that, like, yeah, like something like coronavirus was going to happen and it was going to come from something like a wet market?
yeah, people have been talking about this for years, like
Yeah. Like,
decades.
it's
Yeah.
not. Yeah.
Yeah. So then the other thing is, so this mutation has been observed to happen in a lab, right? It SARS was.
Hmm.
But the second mutation, the cleavage site thing that I was talking about, that's only ever been seen in the wild. And like I said, you see it in the
Yeah.
chicken populations when you get a lot of them. So if it were to be created in a lab, you would need a parent virus. So this one that looks almost like it but doesn't have this cleavage site, and you would have to pass it through the cell cultures or lab animals a bunch of
Okay.
times in order for it to evolve that cleavage site. But like I said, the only time we've seen that happen is in really high density populations in animals, which you wouldn't have in a lab. And no one has ever like reported that they have this parent virus or something close to
Hmm.
a parent virus. So, I mean, again, yeah, it could be a secret. There could have been a secret coronavirus that somebody had and they were doing experiments with it in Wuhan. But
Yeah.
then you look at the fact that the US has been collaborating with this lab for a long time. There's American people that have
Yeah.
worked with these Chinese people. There's international scientists going in and out of that lab. So it's like if you wanted to keep a super secret SARS
This wouldn't
virus,
be the spot.
not a great spot, not a
Yeah.
great spot at all for it. So there's that. And yeah, there's one other mutation that's on there that's like close to this cleavage site. And it's from what they can tell, it's really unlikely that getting it by passing it through cell cultures
Hmm.
would evolve that because it's a part of the virus that needs to interact with the immune system, like it interacts with the immune system of the host,
Yep.
which you excuse me, you don't have in cell culture. There's no immune system; they're just cells. So there's no reason to believe that this particular part of the virus would have evolved from a lab
Yeah.
because it's just not the right conditions. There's no immune conditions that would like force it to evolve
Activate
in a
that. Yeah.
certain way. So basically all signs point to no, it didn't escape from a lab and it didn't evolve from a lab. So like I said, you can't 100% say that somebody out there didn't have, the parent, the
Yeah.
step before SARS-2 or SARS-2 in a lab and that it escaped. But there's really zero evidence to think that that would be the case. And that was the other thing that like that senator and a bunch of other people in the states, the
Hmm.
dum-dums in the US government that were promoting this stuff.
We just want to keep all options open.
Right, exactly. And they were saying, well, we got reports from our American collaborators at the Wuhan lab saying that security protocol was really shit there 2 years ago.
Yeah.
And it's like, yeah, that's true. There was those, as far as I can tell, those reports were true. But again, they would have to have had a very specific strain of the virus there that
Hmm.
could then lead to this. And there's no known strains of that in any other lab in the world. All the other known strains in the world that we know of look nothing like this. All the ones that people use to build viruses
Yeah.
don't look like it. Uh, the computer models would never predict the mutations that SARS-2 is using,
Mhm.
and the cleavage site, has never been that's never evolved in a lab, and it's a very natural thing that you see evolving in other viruses. So basically, there's a lot of science out there saying it's not from a lab. So I think until somebody comes out and says, "Oh yeah, we had a secret strain in the lab," that's the only thing that's going to like tip the scales in terms of saying
Yeah.
it was a lab thing. And
I'll let you fill your beer there.
now I need a beverage. I don't know. I hope that made sense. I kind of got a little lost in the weeds there.
No, no, no. I think it made sense. I mean, as far as I understand, you did a fairly job of dumbing it down for my infantile brain.
Yeah. So I don't know. And then, like I said, there's all the like, if you still don't believe it, then you go to the fact that, you know, there's international collaboration going on in that lab. There's US funding that has
Yeah,
gone into that lab. So if you wanted to have a secret,
this wouldn't be the lab to do it in.
wouldn't be the lab to do it in. And it's not like it's a military facility,
Yeah, and why would they be creating this super secret shitty virus?
Yeah, I never understood that.
Like, like I said, it's not even that good. Like I don't know what the say. You're a conspiracy theorist, it's for world population control or to destabilize other governments. Like, well, it's really hard to control. You know,
Yeah.
people at top levels of government can get it. Like, this is not a useful virus in
Yeah.
like any like that sense that like conspiracy theorists would like feed into, right?
Yeah, it doesn't make sense to me. I mean, unless it's like you were saying, like, oh, well, we were just trying to, we're trying to get the perfect one, and this one escaped before we could get it perfect. But
Yeah,
again, it's like,
but
what
why?
is what
But
is
why
the
wouldn't they have
perfect virus?
started with any of the precursors?
Right, exactly.
They'd be
And
like, oh, we're going to develop our own like, but yeah,
yeah, well, and that's the thing is like there's the evidence that they're not using any of the precursors, so which means that they would have had to take it, find it in the wild, and then
yeah.
start trying to mutate it. And it's like, well, it's just not the way you would do it.
Meanwhile, working around a bunch of American scientists,
Yeah.
and it's like, what are you doing over there? I was, oh, nothing.
Yeah, yeah,
I'm
yeah.
not working. You shut up. Get out of here.
We're cooking bat soup. You wouldn't like
Yeah,
it.
we're cooking veg soup. Fuck off,
Yeah,
kid.
you wouldn't like it. It's gross.
Wouldn't like it.
Yeah. So I had to get that out there because it was just like I said, and I think it's unfortunate that there's like the news articles at the beginning that like wanted to just dismiss it,
Yeah.
which fair. It's true. The science, if you're a journalist and you're like, I talked to the scientists, they told me it's not. So it's not. That's a
Mhm.
good. But people just take that nowadays as like, oh well, why should I believe you? Or the
Oh,
the media's
the
playing
general
into
distrust,
the
yeah, distrust of the media, specifically, I think, in
yeah, well, and
the
then with
U.S.
questioning the WHO and stuff too. So they're like, oh
Yeah,
well, do these scientists work for the WHO? Well, we can't trust them. And so it's just like, look, at mistakes have been made and cover-ups are happening,
yeah,
but that doesn't change the fact that there's hard science that says it's not engineered and that it likely didn't escape from a lab.
mhm,
And just look at who benefits from the cover-ups. The 2 governments that,
yeah,
that
yeah,
that fucked it up.
yeah, exactly. That,
So, of course, they're probably coordinating with each other being
yeah,
like, "Okay, tomorrow you blame it on us, and then the next day
yeah,
we'll
we'll go
blame it
back.
on
Yeah,
you, and then we'll just keep this whole cloud
yeah,
going, and no one will ever know
exactly.
what's going on," and yeah. So, yeah, that kind of upset me. But then, what do we've put that to bed?
Yes, yes. I think we got to the bottom of it. I don't think there'll be any more talk. This is a very popular podcast, as I'm aware of. This what you've said will disseminate, I think through the Twitterverse and forums, and this will all be put to bed.
Well, I'm assuming that most people listen to this already like trusted the official narrative, but maybe they didn't
Yeah,
know why, right?
understand. Yeah,
And so there you go. Maybe that helps. Also, I've taken one of my new hobbies that I've taken a real shine to is going to I mean, we've always been
peeping.
was what?
I said peep. Are you peeping? I'm peeping a lot nowadays.
Well, everybody's at home, so you're gonna
Everyone's at
get that.
home. This is the ideal time to peep. It's my new hobby.
Yeah. No, I mean, I was gonna say we've been long, you and I have long been into weird internet accounts about conspiracy theories and stuff like that. But
Mm.
now I've actually started going through Instagram accounts and reporting anti-vax posts.
Oh, what? You fucking narc.
I know, I kind of find it fun. What can I say? And I like it because it's anonymous, and I'm,
Mm,
a coward that hates confrontation, so I can just go
yeah,
through, 40-year-old Janet's, website, Instagram account that's all
yeah,
about how vaccines aren't real and they cause autism and you should just, eat a lot of spinach and put that up your butt and enema
yeah.
with coffee and it's going to protect you. And I just report all of these in the hopes that she's getting really frustrated that all of her posts keep getting
All of her
flagged.
accounts keep getting flagged and shut down.
So in doing that, I've gotten a number of like conspiracy theory accounts that have now started following me. And so
Oh.
I don't know if they're I don't think
Hmm.
I'm assuming they're following me because they've just seen me following other.
Conspiracy theorist accounts.
Yeah, and so they're like, "Oh, hey, here's a guy who's into it." And then maybe they'll hear this and get really angry, and that would also
Yeah.
kind of make me happy. But
So
I also, like I just said, I don't want to confront them because it's kind of a waste of time. I said coward, but really I'm
yeah.
not
Alright.
scared. So come at me, bro. I'm not going to guarantee that I have the time to, sit and go back and forth with you on Instagram. I'm instead just going to secretly get into your account and report all of your posts.
Oh, just like a narc. Like, I'm not
Just
actually gonna talk to you. I'm just gonna tattle on you to Instagram.
I know, man. But hey, I'm admitting it out here and getting it off my chest. I'm narking on the anti-vaxxers.
Yeah,
It
yeah.
makes me feel good.
Someone's got a narc on 'em. They had an anti-vax, a protest here, like, a couple weeks ago.
Yeah,
Just people out protesting that the virus isn't real,
yeah, and you were there.
and this is all a ploy to get. Yeah, I was there, of
You would,
course.
yeah.
I'm not gonna let Bill Gates put a chip in in my brain. That's what this is about.
Well, good for you.
So we can upload, shitty versions of Windows into me, and I constantly get, updates.
Every night I have to shut down and reboot my whole
Yeah,
brain.
I get confused.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Well, topic number 2 for the day. Let's see if we can dig into this because it's something we
Blood boys.
tease. That's right. It's something we teased a couple times now. Blood boys. So the idea that you can suck the blood out of a young, healthy individual and inject it into
Individual.
yourself to reverse the aging process.
Yeah.
So, what did you find? How have your experiments been
Um,
going?
yeah, mine have been going good. I think I gotta get a better blood boy.
I think I need a new guy
Yeah,
too. He looks really
yeah.
sick.
I lured a homeless man off the street, and I gotta say, I'm doing worse than I was before.
Yeah. Yeah, and now I might have ticks too.
Yeah, yeah,
Bed
yeah.
bug.
I think I've got scabies, and
Possibly hepatitis.
yeah, yeah. Listen,
As
if
far as
if your blood boy has sores, open sores on them, and lesions, that's a bad. You got a bad bag. You got to get a new one.
you gotta get a new one. So here's the thing. I've I don't know where they get the blood. That's the thing. So there's a number of companies that are like
Ambrosia is the
Ambrosia's a
big
big
one.
one. Yeah, they're a
It's
big
a big
one.
tech startup one.
And they got shut down. Well, they didn't get shut down. They got questioned by the FDA like last year or the year before. The FDA was like put out a
Hmm.
warning basically just being like none of this is proven. These
Yeah.
this is, we can't recommend that this is safe, so you probably shouldn't do it. And then they were like Ambrosia was like, "Oh yeah, okay, we're going to stop for a while." And they've since resumed operations but like
Yeah.
at a much smaller scale, but they're charging like 8,000
Yeah.
for a
Per transfusion or something,
yeah.
right?
But if you get 2, you get a deal. It's only 12,000 for 2.
Ooh, that's a good price
That's good. That's a good price.
for that good young plasma.
Yeah, and they're in California, so I'm assuming they're getting a lot of, beach bras that are out there,
Yeah.
at Venice Beach pumping iron or something like that. I don't know. But yeah, I have no idea where they get the blood. But this,
I believe like it's donated, right? Like I think you go in, right?
so are we all just
And then you
swapping each
donate
other's
like
blood?
you just donate your plasma. Or I think there's like the other version of it where like you're just like literally getting a blood transfusion, right? They find you a donor
Yeah.
who has like, the same who's like a viable blood like donor for you, and then you get a full blood transfusion from them,
So you just take
right?
all their blood.
Yeah, like, well, they hook you up. Yeah, they get your old blood,
Yeah.
you take their young blood.
They get
Young
paid.
blood.
They get paid to take my old shitty blood.
Yeah, exactly.
It's basically just like a human dialysis machine.
That's exactly it. Yeah.
Good lord, could you imagine being that hard up for cash? But hey, this is America.
I mean, 8 grand a pop. I mean, if you're getting fresh blood, I bet you could charge 20. Like if you're like, you're like in shape,
Yeah.
like what? Like I don't know like so you definitely have to be, probably 20s like, you know,
Yeah.
that's probably the blood that you want, right? Is like a real healthy
18 to 24, I would say.
18 to 24. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, when you're at the prime of, like, feeling like you can do anything and, you're super dumb and you just wanna rage out
Yeah.
and chase tail all day.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the blood you want, that real primal blood.
Yeah. But also, so that ambrosia company, they're like, oh, like they're doing a study, their own independent study to, try to prove it.
A
Yeah.
study, air
Making air
quotations.
quotes. Um, they're just taking the blood from anyone who's they're saying if you're 35 and older, that's old.
That's old blood.
And then anyone under 24, that's young blood.
Yeah.
But then there's no like dietary restrictions. There's no like placebo. There's no control group.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, that was the big
Like there's no
criticism.
way. Yeah.
They didn't have a placebo group, and they've never released as far as I know, they've never released the data. So they
Yeah.
said like, "Oh yeah, we're going to do this clinical trial, be part of the clinical trial, all this," but they never released the data. And there's
Hmm.
another company, and I can't remember the name of it now.
Vampire.
Which one?
Vampire.
Vampire? No, no,
I think it's in Transylvania. It's a very popular blood
no.
donation
I think
company.
it was Dracula or something.
Yeah, there is subsidiary of Vampire, I think,
Yeah,
parent
yeah, yeah,
company.
yeah, yeah. Owned by Nosferatu.
No.
No, there was one. So this was a couple years ago. Um, but a guy named Bill Falloon, who's a former mortician, so got
Okay.
experience with dead bodies. He launched a
I'm a man.
company. Yeah. And he was like he was holding these symposiums in
Mhm.
Florida, of course, targeting the old people. And
Yep.
it was like 200
I
$200 a head just to get in and hear about all the technologies. Um, and then he was promoting all sorts of stuff. And one of the ones was, blood transfusion. And then the journalist that or the magazine that I get this from, Stat News,
mhm.
very reputable medical news magazine if you're into that kind of thing. They went to the symposium and grabbed a bunch of the leaflets and information from all the companies and stuff who were doing it, and they brought it to experts. And the experts were like, this all just reeks of, I think the quote is, it just reeks of snake oil.
I was just gonna say
Yeah.
snake oil.
Yeah. And I'm just looking through to trying to find the name of his company, but
But also, I think that
Cellularity was,
sell nice. I
yeah,
like that.
that's a good
Wonder how
name.
long
Yeah.
they workshop that fucking name.
Yeah, exactly. And so
Cellularity.
yeah, so
Sounds like a bad comedy club or something.
yeah, totally.
Do it a 10-minute set down at Cellularities.
Elysium Health is another one.
Okay, that's just a movie.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. So anyway,
Ele
a lot of the, companies that are doing it now, there's a couple that seemed like they were more legit, like they were trying to, like, temper expectations a little bit and stuff like
Yeah.
that. Um, and Sorry, companies, I don't have the names of you, so I can't promote you for doing a
I
somewhat
only
good
have the
job.
name of the less reputable
Yeah,
companies.
exactly. I'm boosting the wrong, I'm platforming the wrong
Which, by the way,
individuals.
I believe ambrosia is a terrible salad made from, like, Jello,
Yeah, right?
like whipped cream. Yeah, it's like a nasty old salad from, like, the '70s. It's a weird name.
But maybe
Let's
that's how you, like, bring in all the old people.
Yeah, they're
You're
like,
like,
"I know
"Oh,
what that
I
is.
like ambrosia salad.
I like
I don't
ambrosia."
have to chew it."
Yeah, no yeah, I can just slurp down my Jello salad.
I could just slurp it up. Okay, here's the name of one of the other ones. Elevian? Elevion.
Ah, Le'Veon.
Elevion. Um, but basically, this all started from a process called, or a lab technique. We'll
Mhm.
call it that.
Parabiosis.
Parabiosis. That's right. And that was from,
Sew them rats together, baby.
yeah, basically you sew two animals together to see what happens.
Yeah.
Developed, as you might expect, in the mid
This
1800s.
sounds like a good way to make a virus.
Ooh, yeah, to just pass it back and
Just
forth.
sewing random animals together.
Yeah. Yeah, inspiration for Human Centipede and number of
Ah,
other,
yeah, yeah.
lovely creations.
Good
Uh,
call.
yeah, I think it was originally they started doing it because they obviously saw Siamese twins in human
Right.
populations, and they were like, "Hey, how does that work?" So, it was
I gotta
also
say, these studies came out they started doing it, what, in, like, the '50s or something? Like, the first ones, I think?
parabiosis? No, it was like
Yeah.
mid 1800s is when the technique was first.
Fuck off.
Yeah. I mean, that's
'Cause I know listen,
exactly when you
n
would think it
no
would be.
not to go down yeah, yeah, just
Victorian
sewing
age.
together street urchins,
Yeah,
you know?
there's no rules.
Well, I mean, I don't wanna go too down far down another conspiracy theorist, but I do believe the Nazis were very big into it, a couple of their evil scientists
Mm.
during the war. Who's that guy? The Angel of Death or whatever. He was
Oh,
very,
Mengele.
yeah, Mangala, yeah, I think he was into that.
Sewing
Very into,
people
like,
together?
Siamese twins and, yeah, cutting people apart, sewing them back together.
Well, he was really into twins. Yeah, he did a lot of twin
Yeah,
studies to try and find
nice.
the basis of different things where he would, like, fuck with one twin and not the other, and yeah. Yeah, he was really into twins, so maybe, I don't know, I mean, probably true.
Yeah. That's just a stretch. I mean, I don't know. You know, I don't wanna spread wild information, but yes, the Nazis are behind all of these blood transfusions.
Yeah.
This is a deep state Nazi program
Yeah. Um,
to create the super munch.
the Ubermensch.
Yeah, the Ubermensch.
Yeah. But yeah, no, they did do a bunch in the 50s. They did a lot of studies like that. And so basically, when you do this kind of stuff, so they kind of revived this work. It fell out of favor in like the 1970s, and then in like 2000s it kind of came
Yeah.
back in vogue. And they did a number of these where you take an old mouse and a young mouse and you sew them
Mhm.
together, and they found evidence of regeneration in the old mouse.
And I think bone density, increased bone density,
Yeah, things like this. So now, like, if
which is like that's what you lose when you get old, right? It's like losing bone density is a huge thing.
yeah, bone density. There was some evidence that neurons grew.
Yeah.
You grew new neurons. So they're looking at one company is looking at this stuff for like dementia, Alzheimer's, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But
There's proof of it in mice,
there's proof of it in mice. But again, some
but
of
we
those
are not mice
we are not mice. Good call.
of mice and men.
Of mice sewn to men.
Of mice shown to men. Love that book. Read that in high school.
Could you imagine if that's the thing? Some guy's like, "Yeah, I just had a weekend at the spa," and he comes back on Monday with just mice
Bunch of
just sewn to his
bunch of
body,
rats sewn to his back.
and they're still alive. They're just like, "Meow, meow, meow," and he's like, "Yeah, that one's giving me a lot of good juice. I can feel it. I can
Yeah,
feel
yeah, I can feel that,
it.
yeah.
He's a real frisky one. He bites me every time I shower."
Yeah, yeah, I got which is also that was an issue, real quick, when they were sewing them together, the early experiments that, like, sometimes the mice, they would just one of them would just chew the other one's face off,
Yeah. Oh, yeah, not surprised. Not surprised. It's
or die. Like, it was rare that, like, you get a pair that would, like,
Yeah, well,
you know
'cause that's the thing too, right? Like, it's the same with blood transfusions. When they first started doing blood transfusions, it never worked because we didn't realize about blood types and,
Yeah.
the immune system and stuff like that. So there's a couple of caveats with the mouse studies, not just them being, you can't directly translate mouse to human, but they
Mhm.
also you can't control for all the factors. So it's like we don't know exactly what it is that's causing the effect, right? Like
Yeah.
it could be I don't know, I'm just trying to make something up here on it, but like for example, when you're when you forcibly sew your body to something else, maybe that just triggers some kind of crazy immune
Yes, yeah,
response
wow, the
in
immune
your
response is
own.
like, "Holy fuck."
Yeah, and maybe that doesn't. You don't know.
I
But
yeah.
so that's what the credible, like these, more credible companies that we were talking about. That's what they're actually trying to do. Is they're actually trying to isolate what it could be in the blood that's
Mhm.
responsible for the effect. And if you do that, then you can actually just say, okay, well, it's not just a matter of like just taking blood or plasma, because that's the other thing is they usually just use blood plasma, so you're
Yeah.
not getting any of the red blood cells or the white blood cells from the other
Yeah.
person. You're just getting the fluid and then whatever sort of proteins and different like immune
Mhm.
factors and stuff might be in the plasma. So, but if you can actually figure out exactly what those things are, then you could just isolate those and administer those as a treatment or something. And that's actually been done for diseases, for
Right.
antibody. So you've heard of
Well, they're
antibody
doing it for
therapy.
coronavirus, right?
Right. Yeah. So the idea
Right?
is
You
that
get the plasma of somebody who's had the disease.
Yeah, and, the idea is that they would have antibodies for
Mhm.
you develop antibodies for a disease, so they would have that, and then you could use those you take those antibodies, put them in someone else, and it fights the disease for them, and this
Right.
technique is actually really old too. It was developed in, like, the early 1900s by a guy who actually did the work here in Marburg, where I live. So his like
No big deal.
mausoleum, yeah, no big deal. His mausoleum is a big, like you can hike up and see this guy's mausoleum and stuff. Emil von Behring.
Hmm.
His name is now like one of the big drug companies, Behring Drug Company.
Oh, shit.
It's from Emil von
Damn.
Behring. And
Wow.
so he was like a pioneer of this work where basically they took I think it was hamsters that they infected with diphtheria, which is a bacteria that releases a
Mhm.
toxin that kills you. Um, and you can develop these antibodies to the toxin. So they took hamsters that had the disease and then took their
Yeah.
blood, their plasma, and put it in hamsters that had, just gotten infected and they didn't die. They basically used it as a medicine. And then the technique, they couldn't like really like ramp up the technique because this was again like
Mhm.
1904 or some shit like this,
Yeah.
Um, they couldn't ramp up the technique until they found a way to really like separate those antibodies from the plasma because you needed to get the dose right, you needed to get the concentration right.
Right.
Otherwise, it was just a crapshoot. And with hamsters, it worked because they're small enough that you could just like take a bunch out, ram it
Yeah.
into the next one, and it would work. To do it in humans, you need the dose and the concentration right. So until they were able to
There's more
actually
variables than like a human.
yeah. So until they were actually able to like separate out the antibodies better and like
Mhm.
quantify them and say, "Oh, hey, this is how much you have in a sample and that's how much you need to cure somebody." It didn't really
Yeah.
work. But once they figured that out, what they did is they just started giving it to horses. So they
Mm.
gave the disease to horses because the horses would survive and they would
Right.
produce there's so much blood, they would produce a lot. So
Healthy as a horse.
there you go. And they would basically just like these horses would just become antibody factories, and then they would just take the stuff out of the horse and put it into the human. And there's actually still
What?
horse-derived antibodies. People still do that.
No shit.
So you can still get like horse-derived antibodies for different diseases. And I had the list up
So I should
earlier.
be getting pony blood, not
Yeah, but young pony blood.
yeah, yeah, that's I mean, a pony's a I mean, that's a
Oh yeah,
young
right,
horse,
right, right,
Brad.
right, right.
Jesus.
Duh. Sorry. I deal with viruses, not animals.
Equines.
Yeah, equines.
I'm the equine expert here. Let me fill this in.
So it's actually like there's a basis for it. Like it does make sense
Yeah.
as to why it would work. The thing with the aging stuff is that like aging in general is a really nobody really understands it. So the like I said, the more
I
credible
mean,
way to go about it is to look for the specific things in the blood that might be
yeah.
causing the effect, isolate those, and
I mean, if I had the cash, I would do it.
Mhm.
Fuck it. Why not? Like, you know,
You would get some young blood.
dude, if young blood,
Young
if
blood.
if I mean, like, yeah, if 12K isn't like fucking nothing to you, why not? You'd be like, yeah, there's a little bit of science, whatever. It's not gonna hurt you.
It might.
It could.
It could
So
hurt you.
maybe not. Maybe not. Maybe I wouldn't do the 12. Let's like if I was a billionaire, I would go hire a blood bag for sure.
That you knew was clean.
Yeah, I would like, yeah, be like, you got to get drug tested, and I'm going to have a nutritionist put you on a specific diet. And then once a month, I will drain you of your
To
plasma
almost dead, till you're
to
almost
almost
dead, but
dead.
I'm just gonna
Yeah,
keep you alive.
yeah. And then I'll throw you in my hyperbaric chamber
Yeah,
to recover and then
yeah,
repeat the cycle.
yeah. And for most of the days of the month, you get to, sit by the pool, relax. I don't
Yeah,
want you to be
exactly.
stressed. I want you to be but
Yeah.
maybe you do want them to be stressed. Maybe that's the good blood. So
Oh,
you
you
wanna
do.
you wanna get someone who's, like, fighting
You
shit
want that.
off and
You want that flight blood,
yeah, 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 or fight
that
blood.
fight or flight, whatever. Either way, let's,
So we need to start, human fighting to the death, like a gladiator combat.
yes. So I want an MMA fighter who's on a great diet,
Mhm, 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 mhm. But if you
essentially,
if you have
right?
$1 billion, we can take it a step further and be like, fight to the death, whoever
We
wins.
fight our blood bags against each
Yeah,
other. We gamble on it
yeah, and
in our
then
cabal of
we
billionaires.
select for the most,
Oh,
you know, uh, virile, the most,
yeah,
robust
yeah.
blood.
And I mean, ultimately, this is the great plot of the elites, right? Is to just study the lesser people to figure out what nutrients can be derived from their bodies.
Right. I mean, that's what coronavirus is all about, right? Like they want to get us all
That-
infected so that we go
Yeah,
running to the doctor and they test our blood for
yeah.
coronavirus, but
And
really
then
they're
they're
testing it for
testing
that sweet shit.
compatibility.
Yeah, yeah. uh, hey man, weirder things have happened. Did you see the thing that I sent you about Dr. Serge Voronov? Voronov?
No.
All right. Well, this is my lovely wife, Teresa. When I told her that we were going to be talking about blood bags, she was like, "Oh, you got to check out this guy." And so this is a guy from again, the
Ah, yes.
mid
There we go.
1800s. So right when all the when there was
Quackery was really popping off.
when there was
There's no rules. Playing it fast and loose
there's no
with
rules.
modern medicine.
Basically, they had just outlawed or they lifted the laws on actually studying the human body. So all the
Yeah.
guys that had been, digging up corpses and doing this stuff in their
Mhm.
basement were just like, "Oh, hey, we're not
Hobbyists.
we're not freaks anymore. We can do this in the light
Yeah.
of day." And boy, did they get after it. So basically, yeah, Teresa showed me this from this book by the famous neuroscientist, behavioral guy Robert
Mm.
Sapolsky. He wrote a
Yep.
book about
Heard of it.
a number of books, but I think this one
Mhm.
is the section of the book that Teresa was showing me was in history in this time period. They again were concerned with aging and stuff like that, and they thought that aging was a decline in testosterone. It's kind of new. Testosterone was like the male get
They're
up,
not wrong, right? Like, I get where they're coming from.
but then why
Like,
do?
you get older, your testosterone levels drop,
But then
you stop producing as much muscle or whatever, right? And your body kinda starts deteriorating a little bit.
you can see where they were coming from,
Yeah.
but it really it
Not
becomes
quackery yet.
it becomes glaringly obvious that it's not the whole story when you think about women
Mhm.
and how they don't really have the same levels
Testosterone.
of test. So doesn't
But their estrogen levels drop, right, don't they? As, like, you go through menopause.
right. So then that points to that it's a hormonal thing in general, not just
Yeah.
testosterone,
No, right. Okay, yeah.
right?
That would be your natural conclusion,
Yeah.
not
But this is also we're talking mid 1800s, so the plight of
yeah,
women was not really considered.
that's a very good point.
I mean, they weren't allowed to vote, so they weren't even real people yet.
100%. I think horses had the vote, but not women.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. We were more concerned about our horse antibody factories than we were the women.
Yeah,
Yeah. We're just like, "Oh, they must be hysterical.
yeah,
Somebody get them to lie down or smack her in the face or something." Yeah.
yeah, hysterical. I mean, that's another good topic though too, is the hysterical women of the
Yeah,
1800s
yeah, yeah.
who were just so horny they
Yeah.
couldn't bear it, just losing their minds.
That was
My doctor's hyster my wife's hysterical, doctor.
yeah,
You must do something.
that's actually a yeah, a very true fact in medical history. The first,
Put her on the table and I'll fetch the stimulator.
yeah, the first, female sex toys were developed by doctors. 'Cause
The first female orgasm, I believe, was given, in a London hospital, actually, it's recorded.
in one of those theaters where, like,
Yeah,
everybody's
one of those
watching,
theaters. Yeah.
and it's
Interesting.
this is all these men being like, "Oh, I've seen my wife do that all the time." Yeah.
Yeah,
They're all just lying to each other. "Oh, no, I mean," or they're just sitting there like, "I've never seen this before."
yeah, I've never what?
Anyway, so this was the theory, was that it was testosterone. So basically what they started doing was taking animal testicles, bits of
Hell
animal
yeah, dog.
testicles, and injecting them into themselves. So they would, like,
What do you
grind
mean injecting? I don't know much about I mean, I know a little about testicles, and the word injection, and I don't know I'm having a bit of a cognitive problem putting these 2
You
together.
need a really big needle. Yeah.
Yeah, or what, do I throw them in my Vitamix?
Yeah, it was ground up. They were grinding it. They were taking chunks of them and, injecting them.
Fucking metal, dude.
Yeah. Um, and then from there, it didn't really work, and actually it turns out
Hmm.
they didn't really know that
So you can't grind up testicles?
you can grind up technic that's not the part that
You
failed.
well, you can grind up anything if you got a fucking Vitamix,
Yeah.
but you can't extract all the testicle nutrients from grinding them up and then injecting them. That's weird. Injecting this weird ball slurry into your vein.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I think they would inject it into the buttocks. Um,
Okay,
yeah, as you would. As
put some nuts in your butt.
yeah, as you would. Um,
Scared of Asian? Put some nuts in your butt, baby.
it was really expensive. So,
Yeah,
of course, there was an incentive for all the people that were spending a shit ton of money on this, weird therapy to be like, "Oh, yeah, it's working. I feel great. I
yeah. The placebo, you
yeah, I
know.
don't feel weird or, infected or sore or anything at all." Yeah. But then they moved from that to actually grafting bits of the tissue of the organs to the body. So, like a
This
skin
whole
graft.
dick on your chest.
Yeah,
Ugh.
exactly. Like monkey nuts, like, sewn to your body.
Grafted a
Pig
no.
pig testicle, monkey testicle. At one point, they said that, you could basically go to the hospital or the doctors that were doing this, and you could pick the goat that you wanted, like, they would have, like, from the
Like
stockyard.
a lobster.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly like that.
You're like, "Oh, that one's got some fight in him. Sew those nuts to my
Yeah,
face.
yeah, sew them to my face.
Those are the ones I want."
Could you imagine it just having, like, a ball sack just, like, on your
The
chin or
bu
something?
I thought you I'd go forehead.
Yeah.
You have to, like, part them off your face like hair. Ugh.
I would want
You're, like, flopping them. You have to, like, flip them back all the
yeah,
time.
it becomes like a
It's all
fashion.
hot out. They just droop over your face.
You style them.
Oh, these yeah, yeah, these damn nuts.
I'd want one on each ear, like big lobes,
Yeah.
like big
Ooh.
earlobes,
Yeah.
just big.
Like gauged ears,
Exactly.
except they're
Or
goat
I
testicles.
feel like you could hide them in your armpit maybe, but then if you
Oof.
squish too hard, maybe it, like,
Yeah,
hurt
do you have
you hurt your arm nuts.
yeah, can you feel your goat nuts?
Yeah. No, turns out no, because usually the
So
tissue died right away.
yeah,
So
so you'd have a rotting nut sack on your body.
thankfully, they didn't transfer the whole sack. It was just, like,
Oh, it's just
slices of the
of the nut.
tissue,
Okay.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Like, this sounds
Yeah, and
God
some
damn.
people even
That
showed up with their own animal, so they're like, "Ooh, this is my prized,
pig.
dog. This
Yeah,
is this is Rover. He's got tons of energy. I love him a
yeah,
lot." So,
yeah.
and I definitely haven't been doing weird stuff in the barn with him. I'm
Yeah,
here to
yeah.
get
Try to
I'm here to get legit treatment. Scrape his nuts and put it on my leg. Yeah.
Oh my god,
So the I
that was a wild time for medicine. That's
dude, can you imagine like well, I mean, there's all this stuff and there's very little I mean, surprisingly, people were actually like skeptical of it. Like there's apparently the yeah, I know. I look back at these things and think like these people were nuts, like people believe but then I mean,
yeah,
look at our situation today where the president of the
yeah, yeah, yeah,
US just said you should drink bleach in more or less
yeah.
in
He
fewer
didn't say
words.
should. He didn't say should. He was like,
Maybe.
"We gotta look into that. Can you inject it?
Yeah.
Can you? Let's look into that."
Did you see the reports that there's a obviously an ultra religious sort of, guy, preacher kind of guy that is peddling a disinfectant bleach cure for viruses and the disease and
Mm, I think I heard about
he
that.
was writing letters to Trump like not too long ago, so now everyone's like, is this where he got it from?
I mean,
It makes sense. It's
it's a
very
good
on
theory.
brand. It's very on
I've
brand.
seen I've seen Kenneth Copeland do some online sermons and try to blow away the coronavirus with the breath of God.
Oh, those are great. Did you see the
Yeah,
remix?
yeah, of
Somebody remixed it into a sweet beat. It's sweet.
course.
But yeah, so I mean, like, there was like, journalists and stuff like that being like, "This is quackery.
Like,
This is ridiculous,"
yeah,
and good as they should.
rightfully so.
Yeah, but it does speak to like, I mean, the idea, the concept of it. We're still, if you look at going way back to that to what is happening now,
Yeah.
it's
Is
basically
it
the
that
same
much
thing.
different?
And in some cases it works, right? Like we have the
Yeah,
antibody therapy. We have,
yeah.
there's things that work. Blood transfusions in general. Could you imagine being
Just work. Yeah.
the first blood transfusion? I think the first blood transfusions they tried like putting like cow blood into people. And of course they died.
No, no, not great.
But how else do you get to this? This brings up the
Yeah,
age old
like
question.
when you don't understand, like you have no idea of like cell structure or that sort of thing,
Yeah,
or like
the immune system.
blood types.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. You just, I mean, I think it's you just gotta take a shotgun approach. Put cow blood in some people, be like, oh, maybe hog's blood will work.
Yeah, maybe it was the wrong
Hog.
cow.
Yeah, maybe it was. Yeah, like
Let's try another one.
I follow an Instagram account. This woman who has written a few books based on like that time in medicine.
Yeah.
And it's horrific.
Oh. Oh.
Like, oof, you see like the syphilis treatment, like, and that makes sense. I think like at that time, grafting
Mhm.
was like a very hot,
Hot topic, yeah.
yeah, or like yeah, really hot procedure because like people were losing their noses and whatnot from syphilis.
Okay.
And so what you would do is you would, and this, I mean, too bad this isn't a visual medium, but you would essentially you would wrap the person's hand around their forehead,
Okay.
right? So that your bicep would be like in front of your nose, but your nose isn't there anymore. And then they would slice chunks of your bicep off
Yeah.
and then put it onto your nose and they would sew it in. And then you would sit like that for like a month or so until the skin started grafting on. And then they would slice the skin and try to make you a new nose out of your bicep.
So your bicep is, like, more or less sewn to your face in some kind of
Yeah,
way, and you
exactly.
have to sit like
Yeah.
that for a month.
Yeah.
Dude.
They would take like the top layers, like not the muscle tissue, but the skin
Yeah,
tissue,
yeah, yeah.
and then sew it onto your face. And then you would like be having his hand strapped to the top of your fucking head for like a month or more.
Yeah.
Well, the skin like started to grow into your face, and then they would cut it and then try to
So just
make you
kind
a
of
real
flay
nasty
it and
nose.
then, like,
Yeah, yeah,
connect
yeah, yeah.
it
They
to
just flay
yeah.
it.
Dude, could you imagine if you sneezed? And, like and you just, like, sneeze into your open bicep, or you just rip the whole
Oh,
thing off, like
oh.
That's gnarly, or having to eat, like, with your open bicep wound right next to your mouth,
Dude,
just like,
I'm sorry. I just be like, no, like I'm done.
I just don't need a nose.
I just don't need to live. We're done here.
I mean,
Like I'm out.
it's like
I'm just what am I hanging on to here?
your 20-hour a day at the sweatshop
Yeah,
job? Yeah.
exactly. Like no, like no thanks. I'm good.
Yeah.
Like I'm about done.
What am I living for? The
Yeah.
sooty, gross streets of Industrial
Yeah,
Revolution London, like
yeah, exactly. Like, no, we're good. Just, just go ahead, put a bullet in me now. That'd be instead of that procedure.
but I really wanna hang on till we find the Northwest Passage.
Yeah, that's right. I gotta see it.
Jesus. Yeah, man, it's wild. It's really wild, but it makes you think, like, what are the things that are gonna be that we're gonna, like, in 100 years, they're gonna look back at us and be like, "They did what?"
Yeah.
But it doesn't I can't
They built 5G, didn't they know it was giving everyone viruses? Unbelievable.
I can't imagine that. But, like, seriously, like, I can't imagine what is, like, a gnarly procedure that it's, like, where you could look at today where you're like, "It's gotta be a better." I mean, maybe, like, cutting out tumors or something, where they're just like, "Ugh, barbarians." They didn't just, like
Zap them with
yeah, or something,
whatever rays. Yeah.
but I can't otherwise, like, what? Plastic surgeries, I guess?
Yeah.
Plastic surgery, I mean, like, when you think about it, like
Plastic surgery is pretty gnarly. Like, if you ever seen anybody get a like rhinoplasty,
yeah,
they're trying to make the nose smaller, and you watch them take they use this like a bone, like essentially they chisel your fuck. They just like chisel chunks of your fucking nose bone out.
yeah, I've
Like, do you have any
already
idea? Like, I got to give it to that, to those old rich ladies who are getting this done. Like, if you've ever been punched in the nose, it hurts. Like, if you got your nose broken, like it hurts for a long time. I can't imagine what it feel like if somebody chipped chunks of your nose out.
yeah, well, but they're also getting those
I was just gonna say, you get a sweet Valium vacation after
yeah,
that, don't you?
yeah. But
Little Valium and rosé
it is the,
goes a long way.
it is the, you know, the cost of the price of, vanity wanting to do that. But, I mean, I guess the other thing the other things that people might look at is some of the shit that we look at as quack stuff already, like coffee enemas, or whatever. You you're looking at
Is
me like
that a real
you're
thing?
looking at me like you've never heard of that.
I've heard of it, but I don't think it's a real
You don't
thing.
think
I
people are
think it's
doing
a
that?
thing people say that they say it's a thing, but what's the point? What, you get more pep in your step?
Yeah, allegedly. I mean, I've never tried it.
Also, it makes no sense. Listen, if I need that much pep, like, I'm just gonna go do some coke.
Yeah.
Like, let's get real. I mean, if I'm like, "Oh, if coffee's not cutting it," it's like, well,
No,
I'll go buy some I'll go get a prescription for Adderall,
I imagine there's
before I
uh,
start shooting Java up my butt.
yeah, I imagine there's some kind of I imagine it's, gonna be linked to antioxidants. That's another big
Mm.
fame or, that
Yeah.
the quack people love to talk about.
Remember acai berries?
Acai, yeah,
Acais were like, that was the hottest goddamn berry on the planet, like, 5, 6 years ago, and now
can't find them.
can't find a good acai berry.
Yeah, yeah. Turns out it was, pro-oxidant.
It was pro-oxidant. Are you pro or
Yeah,
antioxidant?
I'm definitely antioxidant.
I'm antioxidant.
Yeah, hashtag woke.
Woke the fuck up.
Hashtag woke and full of breath. I got all the oxidant.
I have all the oxidants.
Yeah. No, I don't. Yeah, I can't remember. The to close out this rambling that we've just gone down.
Yeah.
Uh, I was sent a link from a listener, Brian, down in Australia. Thank you, Brian, for sending this to me. Of a guy.
Thanks, Brian.
He's Canadian. He just lives in Australia.
Uh,
But yeah, Brian.
oh, yeah,
Yeah,
Brian. Oh,
Brian.
thanks. Thanks for this link.
He sent me. He was like, "Yeah, you might appreciate this," and it was like some Australian guy that was like ranting, about how the virus, everyone's got it wrong. You don't get infected by a virus. It's actually just like your cells becoming too toxic. And so like you have to cleanse your cells and that's actually what a virus
Okay.
is. And so you can't actually catch a virus. It was nonsense. It was absolute nonsense. And I didn't know we were going to go down this road. Otherwise I would have briefed up on the video and gone step by step, like to talk about how bullshit
Of
it
what?
is.
Yeah.
But
Oh, real quick. Have you heard that the virus attacks like your blood vessel walls?
mm, the corona.
and
COVID.
yeah, the coronavirus, and they're having like a weird. There's a very small portion of like young people having sudden stroke
Huh. I hadn't
as a
heard that.
cause from the virus.
I hadn't heard that. Where'd you get that? Facebook?
Yeah, Facebook. I got it from. No, I honestly I got it from Reddit. Um,
I hadn't heard that one.
from it was like like it was like this is like it's real stuff they're finding, but I think it's a really small group. They don't really have any
Yeah. Well,
like hard proof, but it's just like they're just finding. I guess right now it's like there's these small populations of
there's some case
like
reports that are that they're
yeah,
seeing this. Yeah, I mean,
or like sudden stroke, and they have coronavirus. They had coronavirus at the time of the stroke, right?
yeah. Yeah, I mean, who knows? There's going to be a lot of things. The thing is, like, it's obviously it obviously infects lung cells. Like that's the main
Yeah.
thing. But I mean, they have found it in poop, so we know that it gets into the intestine, but we don't know if it's
Hmm.
like, how well it
Well,
gets in
also
there.
yeah, like it affects your lung cells, but there's not like a huge uptick. Like I have asthma, so I was oh, this will be worried about it. But then there's been no like real correlation between severe cases and people with asthma.
No.
Not as much as they thought they would. Like it's not as serious,
Hmm.
you know.
I don't want to speculate because I don't know. I've not seen the numbers, but you would imagine that it would like that. Like,
Yeah, because you get pneumonia.
yeah, you would be at greater
If you're an
risk.
asthmatic, pneumonia is not great.
Mhm.
But apparently, like, there's like just in like I guess the case numbers they looked at of people who have died from it, right? Those infected who had like there's not a large number that are asthmatics. Like there's not
Hmm. But that doesn't.
it's not the mass increase that they thought it was going to be.
Yeah, that doesn't necessarily mean that if you are asthmatic and you get it, that your chances of dying are higher. It could just be that asthmatic people are heeding the warnings and staying home.
That is a very good point.
Yeah. So who knows?
Hmm.
But I found this during the research. Let me end with this fun little tidbit
All right.
for you. While I was doing the research of like trying to cheers.
By the way, yeah. By the way, you're gonna have to top people sewing goat nuts onto themselves. So
Well, is
I'll stand by.
when I was looking up all the stuff about the science of why SARS isn't engineered, I was going down all these different, rabbit holes of scientific papers about the nature of coronaviruses and all
Yeah.
these coronaviruses that they were like comparing the SARS-2 with. And it turns out that some coronaviruses do attack the intestines. So you get lung ones, but you also get intestinal ones.
Yeah.
And there was, I think, a couple of years ago, one of the examples for a jump between species was swine acute diarrhea syndrome.
That sounds terrible.
It's
Pig shit.
the pig shits.
Oh, I got the pig shits,
So
boy. Tell you what.
rather than SARS, it's called SADS.
Sad?
Swine acute diarrhea syndrome.
Oh no.
SADS, COV. It jumped from
Dude,
something
I'll take the SARS.
into pigs. Yeah. So far SADS hasn't broke out in humans, but if you thought you needed toilet paper before.
Dude, that's gonna be the real run on TV.
Yeah. And maybe that's it.
We'll just move to a bidet culture.
Maybe these people
I'll just
knew
run.
about SADS and we didn't, and they were running out and getting the TP.
That's right. In a
And
bit, we might be behind the curve.
yeah, who's the idiot now?
Yeah.
Swine acute diarrhea syndrome. It's a real thing.
Man.
You get the SAD.
Don't get a case of the SADS.
All right, man. That was fun.
Cool.
Until next time, I'll catch you later.
Thanks, Brad. Talk to you later, man.
There you have it. Many thanks again to my good buddy out on the West Coast, Jared Cuthbertson. Always enjoy having him along for the ride. And thank you for listening. As always, follow us wherever you're getting your podcasts. Subscribe, rate, comment. Really helps us out. Follow us on Twitter, Instagram, @2BradForYou, @BVamPairedOn on those services. And submit your questions. Please submit your questions for our upcoming 50th episode. And hopefully we can have some fun with that. So again, @BVamPairedOn, @2BradForYou. Go to the website, 2bradforyou.wordpress.com. You can submit questions there. Love you guys. Thanks for listening, and we'll catch you next time.